and Starbucks have their own point systems and reward systems. Imagine being able to trade those tokens for other tokens. Let's say you prefer to have Starbucks versus having those airline miles, or maybe you want to just cash them out for someone that is willing to buy them at a discount. So that's another thing that's being developed, and the companies working on those are Ether Delta, Oasis Pro, and Swap. So those are companies that are actually working on this as we speak. Banks and charity. There are approximately 2 billion people in the world that are unbankable because of their restricted income or because they live in hard-to-reach rural locations. So Ethereum provides a platform that dissolves barriers to banking and payments with no need for bank branches. Even the UN launched a large-scale test of using Ethereum to distribute funds for aid to make sure that they combat corruption. Because often if they're sending money to places like Kenya or in Africa, you have the local administrators that will take over the money and use it for themselves or pay their buddies off. So they use it as a way to verify that the funds actually go where they're needed and to make sure that they actually use in the way that they're intended. And a couple projects working on this are Human IQ, and Omai's Go. Now imagine also having better and cheaper loans and credit. Cutting out the middlemen when it comes to getting a loan. We all know that getting a mortgage, getting a personal loan can be a huge painstaking process. To look through your personal history, look at your credit report. It can take months. Even for a standard mortgage, can take at least 30 days to get a standard mortgage, conventional mortgage. Imagine that you are able to cut out these middlemen. You can get loans at a much cheaper rate, so the interest rates will be much lower because obviously they add their fee just being there. And the underwriting process itself is also much faster. And also Ethereum cuts out much, as I said, cuts out much of the middleman and protects its users from hacking of financial assets and sensitive information. These banks that deal with your information, they have your social security numbers, they have your credit reports, they're all sitting on their data warehouses, which are vulnerable to attack. Through the blockchain, it prevents, since it's encrypted, prevents that information from being, released out there to bad actors. And a couple projects working on just this, on peer-to-peer loans, are Etherloan, WeTrust, and WeFund. So those are just a few of the projects that we have our eyes on. There are so many more that are coming to market. And they're raising money through this process of the initial coin offering, which is the way to think about this. It's kind of like an IPO. They go out with an idea, they have a product, they have a team in place, they put a white paper out there so that they explain their product. Maybe they have the functioning alpha or beta on the market. And they raise money from people all around the world. Usually these ICOs last anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks, even a few months. And it's a great way for these teams and projects to raise money and capital where they wouldn't be able to raise money elsewhere. Maybe they don't have the credentials to raise money from venture capital. Obviously that means you have to be very careful with where you put your money because these can also be scams. You have to do your due diligence, And what we're looking at the teams. We want to look at the idea, are they tackling a real world problem? Are they solving a real world use case? We want to make sure they're not being too greedy. Some of them are just hoarding insane amounts of cash. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the Tezos new blockchain, but they want to build something similar to Ethereum that has a smart contract functionality, but they had a 2-week ICO fundraising round, and it's uncapped. And I think they're going to raise something like $500 million for something that doesn't even have like a working product yet, which is absolutely absurd. So those are things to keep in mind. Make sure they have a working product. Make sure they have a good team that has experience. Make sure they're tackling real-world issues. And hopefully, going through that process and getting more information, you can protect yourself from some of these scams that are inevitably going to be out there. Yeah, and so we've seen really widespread institutional recognition of Ethereum, and you see a lot of these private multinational conglomerates and corporations backing Ethereum. There's this newly minted organization called the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which launched in February of this year, and it currently has, over 200 companies, something like that. Yeah, some of them include massive financial institutions, insurance companies, pharmaceuticals. Yeah, like with huge names like Microsoft, UBS, Deloitte, Intel, BNY Mellon, BP. What this really excites me is it really shows how they see the value in the blockchain, and specifically in Ethereum, and how they actually made a financial commitment to explore the technology. So in order to be part of this group, they have to pay something like, I think it's a few $1 million.
No, it's about 25,000.
Oh, that's it? All right. So I guess it's a small amount, but still it shows some level of commitment. Yeah. Yeah, it shows that they're at least exploring the technology, and they're committed to exploring the technology, and they see the value in Ethereum and maybe even having a private blockchain that they use just within their organization. Because imagine a bank like UBS, they have over 200,000 employees around the world. How do they keep all their records straight, you know? How do they have all their different employees and organizations interact with one another? How do they make sure they have the right copy of a single record that will be bounced around from accounting to sales to their supply and manufacturing plants? How do they know that it's the same information that is untampered, is unhacked, and has its own data integrity? All right, now it's time for the shameless plug-in part 2. So as we mentioned before, we're starting an investment fund. We really believe that cryptocurrencies have reached the tipping point, driven by institutional corporate acceptance and mainstream awareness. People are really starting to take notice. This stuff is just taking off. But then again, you have to be very smart about where you put your money, and that's why I'm spending most of my time looking at the new technologies and products being put out there. What are some of the new ICOs? Where are the new blockchains coming to market? I mean, this space just moves so fast, and you really have to have your pulse on the market as to see what's going on. And our goal is really to invest in the most transformative and groundbreaking blockchain-focused initiatives. Our personal investment thesis is we don't do day trading. We think that's a fool's errand. No one can successfully, time the highs and the lows. What we want to do is institute some form of fundamental value investing. Find the technologies that show the most promise, tackle real-world applications, have a working product, have people using that product, show real promise, and we understand that there's going to be a lot of fluctuations and high volatility in this market. It's just the name of the game, But that's why, we intend to buy and really hold it for at least a year, if not longer, depending on what their appetite is, and kind of form a nest egg for investors that want to come on board and don't really have the time. I mean, maybe you have the interest, but maybe you don't have the time. You have a 9-to-5 job, you have mouths to feed at home, and you don't really want to be following these markets or pulling your hair out when the market dips. That's kind of our job. Well, hopefully not pulling our hair out, but but yeah, that's basically our investment ethos and thesis, is to really find the few technologies, 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them, that we think hold the most potential, buy their tokens, maybe even if we have enough money and able to raise enough money, approach them, the companies themselves, and have seed investments in the companies. So instead of waiting for the ICO, actually get in before the ICO, which is something that we're pursuing as well, talking to a few different blockchain companies that we think hold promise, and we're reaching out to them individually to invest.
Because the ICO has a huge spike, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like it's being given to people that are more close to the development group, etc.
Yeah.
So usually for the normal people that's not involved, it's very hard to get it.
Right.
And the spike comes down a lot, like, so usually it takes a year or so.
Right.
They come back to that price, right? After the ICO. So I'm kind of wondering how you time that.
Yeah.
How you would filter out all that noise of speculation that happened on that.
Yeah, you're right. Some of these ICOs have sold out in minutes,
Yeah.
And I think some of the ICOs coming out in the future, they're going to implement safeguards against that, because they really want it to be spread around, and they're going to have limits on how much people can buy in. So that's going to help us out as well. But yeah, I mean, we have to see how responsible the terms of the ICO are. If we see that they don't have integrity, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to just put our money anywhere. We're not following the hype. We're not going to be investing based off of emotion, which unfortunately a lot of people do in this market. There's the concept of FOMO, fear of missing out. You know, you don't want to be that player of just, oh, like it rose 10x in the last month, you know, we have to hop on board too. Like, that's not how it works. That's how you're going to lose your money. So, I mean, we kind of understand these things, and we hope to be implementing these strategies as we move forward.
And you want to tell a little bit about the investment, the amount, and how do we distribute it?
Yeah, in terms of the fund, so we have a team of lawyers involved. It's Fifth Level Capital. They're based in Austin, Texas, and they deal directly with private equity funds and forming private equity funds and helping manage them. So they're currently working on the entity. This is brand new, this initiative. I mean, I have commitments so far of over $50,000. Obviously, it's not much, but that's mostly just through like friends and family. And right now, we're really reaching out to a broader audience, and we have to limit how much we can market and reach out to people because we don't really have the entity in place just yet. Even though in the next few weeks we will, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. But the minimum is, I mean, it's pretty reasonable. It's $5,000 minimum. You can invest more if you'd like. But as I said, you know, don't invest anything more than you're willing to lose. These are speculative and risky markets. But then again, without risk, what kind of reward is, you know, what reward will you have? Also, I mean, so we have a profit sharing kind of mechanism where we would take a 2% management fee, which is pretty standard with investment funds. And anything up to 10% is yours to keep. You know, guaranteed. Anything above that, it would be a profit sharing scheme where we would get 20%, you get 80%, which is more than reasonable. And I've actually spoken with a few other funds that are out based in the U.S. as well. There's one called Pantera. I spoke with the CEO. His name's Dan Moorhead, and they just announced a $100 million fund that will invest exclusively in ICOs, and they follow a very similar model.
Can you give an example of numbers? Somebody invests $10,000 and his money goes to $50,000. How much you keep and how much you?
I mean, you have to do the math, but it's pretty simple. You get the first 10%, right? And anything above that, you keep 80%. And I think it's pretty reasonable to expect to have 100% returns in this market, if not more. I mean, I can't promise anything. You know, obviously, as I said, it's risky and speculative.
So this fund itself is a private equity fund?
Yeah, well, it's a limited partnership, but yes, yeah, very similar to a private equity fund. Yeah.
So do we need to be accredited investor?
You do not.
But investing in private equity fund, you need to be.
Well, it's not exactly a private equity fund, just a limited partnership. But in terms of the, I can put you in touch with my lawyer, and we'll iron out exactly the details. We do have a screening process. We can talk about it after this. I don't want to take up everyone's time with that, but yeah.
Yeah, you have to be a qualified institutional
Yeah.
investor, and so we're still working through exactly what that qualification level is going to be. You're right, for typical private equity funds, you have to have a minimum net worth of like $1 million or so to invest in it.
Yeah, accredited investors usually have a minimum net worth of $1 million, or they have an annual income of $250,000. But there are ways around that. I mean, obviously that really limits our market. So we're working around that. I'm not exactly sure what the qualifications will be just yet, to be honest, but it's obviously something we're working on.
You should give your business cards to it.
Yeah. And what else? Yeah, oh, another thing that I forgot to mention, of course, is security. It's a very important piece, and that's something that we deliver, which honestly, it could be worth just the whole value of the fund. Because when the real security hole when it comes to cryptocurrencies are the exchanges. You know, those are the hackable points of vulnerability. In terms of the protocol, I mean, some of the best hackers have tried to hack the Bitcoin protocol, the Ethereum protocol, but they haven't successfully been able to do so. So the protocol is ironclad as far as we can tell. But in terms of losing the coins, it would be if you keep it on exchange. That's why what we do is we take it off the exchange. We only have a very small nominal amount on the exchange, but we hold it onto cold storage. There are various ways, like various devices you can use. You know, keep it in a bank vault. But we use Nano Ledger S, and we'll have several of those devices. But basically, you'll be extracting it from the exchange and making sure it doesn't sit on there, so that no one can really touch it. But that's a really big piece, and I mean, if you own any significant amount of cryptocurrency yourself, I would really recommend getting a Nano Ledger S. They're not too, you can buy it online, it takes a few weeks to receive. They're not too difficult to set up. And another advantage of going with us is, we have a track record with the exchanges that I'm actually able to purchase and sell $250,000 worth of cryptocurrencies every day on a daily basis. And when I have more investors come in, I'll be able to increase that as well. So we do have liquidity. Whereas if you need to verify yourself, that can take days, if not weeks. And you often get started with a very small amount there, very small limit. It's usually, I think it's $500 like on Coinbase or GDAX. And you have to like show that you have some buying activity before you can really ramp that up.
Which exchange?
Yeah, we use a few. Use GDAX for Bitcoin or Ethereum, Poloniex for some of the more obscure ICOs, Kraken sometimes as well. Bitfinex is also a good one.
Bittrex as well.
Yeah. So it really depends on like the prices on the particular exchanges, because there are some arbitrage opportunities there as well, but those can vary from exchange to exchange. And our liquidity on each exchange, but so far, I mean, GDAX, we have the highest liquidity, but also pretty high liquidity with the other ones as well.
So your investment strategy in the coins or in the companies that are...
Both.
You like?
Both.
What's the ratio you see as...
Yeah, well, we haven't invested in the companies yet because we need to raise money for that first in order for them to actually talk to us. Yeah, I would think about 50-50 if I had to put a number to it. I mean, obviously that strategy can change, but I think especially with Ethereum, when you have so many ICOs being built on top of Ethereum, if you invest in Ethereum, you're really investing in these other ICOs as well. But then again, these ICOs can have even more explosive growth than Ethereum just by itself. So that's why it's good to keep your eye on all of these things. And obviously, if you have an investment in the company itself, you have some sort of collateral in the sense of the assets that the company may own as well. And there are different ways to structure those investments as well. But also, if you invest in a company before the ICO, obviously you have much more favorable terms, and your return is potentially much higher.
Just a real basic question. There's like 900 different types of cryptocurrencies out there, and anybody can just start a cryptocurrency that can obviously do it.
Yeah.
If you do that, doesn't that dilute all the other coins as one gets bigger, like Ethereum gets bigger and bigger?
Right, that's a good question. I mean, my personal thesis is that since the market is so large, we're looking at an international, really global ecosystem. These currencies can mutually exist and fill particular niches. You have something like, obviously, Bitcoin may be better as a store of value. It may not be as good for transactions compared to Ethereum. And Ethereum has that smart contract functionality that Bitcoin doesn't have. Also, you have something like Monero or Zcash, which have an extra layer of anonymity. So if you want purely private transactions, which a lot of people can benefit from, obviously that serves a different function than some of the other currencies.
So like a drug dealer would use Bitcoin, is that what you're saying?
But maybe. I wouldn't for that, but and yeah, thank you. Really appreciate you guys coming out.
I'll give you our business card for Leeor, and if anybody wants to keep in touch or come to more meetings, get smart.
We also, I mean, we want to start more of like a meetup to
just give him a call. That's
to exchange ideas. I'm happy to talk about anything crypto. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like how to get started actually using them.